Kelly FENNIG. I was formerly a producer at Slant Six Games, and let me tell you about what we had learned about making a kids game. So I have a small team, about 7 people, and we were given this thing called the Grand Experiment. It was a task to, within 16 weeks, design a game that was to have a bunch of novel concepts to the company. Things including like having it playable on all major tablets, have it 4-player pass and play, make it a paid app, make it a board game, but put a twist on it. So far, yeah, this was no problem. And then have a bunch of little mini games in there too. Okay. And then have some original IP about pirates. Okay, yeah, we got this. Piece of cake, no problem. Okay, then they said, well, let's make it actually for kids, ages 6 to 9. This was our reaction. And then we thought, well, it could be fun, right? Anyways, the reason why this was our reaction is because we were a AAA console studio. We were very familiar with making games about zombies, Navy SEALs, and tactical shooters. We have no idea about how to make games about kids or what kids like or something that is completely non-violent. So this experiment, the Grand Experiment, became known as Max's Pirate Planet. It's a 4-player pass and play board game, but instead of having a traditional flat board, it's actually on an interactive globe. Obviously made for kids, and it had 5 selectable unique characters. Basically, it's Mario Party on a planet, or on a tablet, where you basically spin a spinner, you move your piece, you play some sort of mini game in hopes to get a treasure, and then you pass it on. And then you also have some opportunities to loot some treasures from some other people, because the objective is to get 4 treasure chests, and if you can, then you can play this final mini game to win the final game. So let's go back to really what the heat of this topic's about making kids games. Like I said, we had no idea how to do this, but luckily we got some help. Dr. David Varner, he's a professor of psychology at UCSD. He also runs the Language and Development Lab. They're specializing in our target audience. And we wouldn't have got his help if he was not the brother of our art lead, Sean Varner. So the good doctor, he helped us supplement our research with his findings and some of his experience and knowledge, and he really gave us some great advice on how to focus test and play test with kids. The 3 things that really stood out were, 1, get it in front of the kids as soon and as often as possible. 2, carefully craft your questions, because to total strangers, kids will say anything, and they want to please you. They really want to give you the right answer. And then thirdly, watch their body language for their answers. Don't rely on their words, because kids will say anything. And those of you who are parents can probably relate. So this grand experiment, since it was a grand experiment, we wanted to use a scientific method to test out not only our own theories, but the theories that we got from Dr. Varner. So if you're not familiar with the scientific method, you basically take an idea and you test it out in a controlled manner against your target groups. We have our kids. We had kids at heart. I like to call them hipsters. And then we also had a family play environment. What you do is, once you have your control, observe the reaction, and then change only one variable, rinse and repeat, and check it out again. Now, basically every assumption, everything that we got from Dr. Varner, we tested out. Because when we made assumptions at the beginning and we thought this was fun, I can't stress this enough, every assumption we made was wrong. So the feedback that we got, when we got it from both the parents and the adults and the kids, it really mattered what the kids said and lesser from what came from the adults. So at the end of the day, we basically had a credo saying that when in doubt, run it by the kids. So for the remainder of this talk, I'm going to explain to you what we kind of found during this grand experiment of creating this game by watching kids. As well, if I got some time, I'll share some tidbits that we tested out from Dr. Varner as well, too. And this is the whole point here, is I want to share the experience that we had. It was very fun. So first of all, character creation. Let's make some pirates. We started off making a few pirates. In fact, we made a lot of pirates. And we had a tough time trying to figure out what did kids like. So we went back to what the good doctor told us. And we said, okay, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to group them up in small little groups, see which ones stick out, and then we're going to specialize on maybe one character and using the scientific method, just tweak little features here and there and see which stands out, which ones are popular, which ones are not. Now, how to get the feedback back from the kids, again, it was by watching their body language, but one of his pieces of advice was craft your questions very carefully. So we wanted to have questions that were based on relationships. We wanted our kids to have a strong intrinsic feeling, like this is a friendship with this character. So we asked questions like, who would you want to play with at recess? Who probably has the best toys? Or who would be your best friend? So these type of questions really got some honest responses from them. So we never asked the questions like, who do you like? Because again, remember, they want to please you. They want to give you the right answer. So they kind of look to you going, I like this one. And also don't ask questions that have a negative in it. Like don't. It actually confuses them. So don't. And lastly, whatever they give you, whatever response they give you, never follow up with why. Because they can't articulate. They don't know what they like. It's a waste of time. Just read their language, nod, and move on. You'll get it eventually. So we eventually went through, by a process of elimination and by testing out different things, we came up with our 5 crew that we got below. And this is kind of the evolution of how it flowed out. We've got Emma, we've got Alex, we've got Rusty, we've got Finn, and we have Scully. So let me share some of the things that we learned so far in just this character creation process. One, we found for kids, especially since our target audience is ages 5 to 9, create characters that are 2 to 3 years older than the children playing the game. The reason why is because there's someone they are aspiring to become, yet they can still relate to. So you don't want to make them too old. They just want to grow up. They want to have someone that they can go, I can be that person someday. So again, 2 to 3 years. Don't make it more than 3 years. Save that for your mentor, your narrator characters, the people who are giving them guidance or direction or tutorial, because then they can really relate to those people, but they're not scary, big, authority adults. So they respond to some aspirational older brother or sister character, not an adult. Another one which was kind of obvious, we knew this, but we wanted to test it out anyways, because this was an experiment, that human characters are polarizing. No boy will play a girl character, and vice versa. Well, partially because they can't relate. They are different. And also they could get teased. So this was kind of obvious. So we thought, animals might be the androgynous solution to this. And then the good doctor told us, animals might not be age appropriate. Animal characters tend to appeal to younger people about 2 to 5. Okay, that's great. We've got to have at least 5 characters. If we have boys and girls, what happens if you have 4 boys or 4 girls? We're kind of screwed. But he also said, older kids, okay, now we piped up and listened, they like things that are not of this world, like pirates and fairies. Well, we got pirates, that's good. Just things that are not of this world. So we said, let's try anamorphic animals. That's not of this world. We tried it out, we tested it out, and it actually went from being babyish or childish, when you heard that word a lot, to cool. Another thing that was kind of really interesting was the fact that kids like edgier characters. And what do I mean by edgier? Well, our 3 most popular characters are Rusty, Finn, and Scully. They look really happy, don't they? But it was what of the elements that made these guys popular. When we looked into it, they like things like the mean eyebrows. They like the fangs. They like rips and tears in their clothing and their attire. Even scars. And they like some badass was the term from the 9-year-olds, accessories. So apparently this is what kids liked. We ran this by the parents, and the parents go, well, we think these might be too mean, and my kid won't like this. Thank you for sharing. Let's test it out. So we did some different things. We made them goofier. We made them more human-like. We made them nicer. We went through a couple iterations of this. These characters went from being, yeah, to, I don't like them. And just by tweaking a couple things. So this kind of got into that whole, this was like a common trend through our little experiment that parents don't know their kids, or at least some don't, which is kind of a shame since they've got all the buying influence. But yeah, whenever we heard some feedback from adults, again, run it by the kids. One thing we did though is, sorry kids, no weapons. That was part of their badass accessories. They liked weapons, but we wanted to make a non-violent game, so we had to draw the line somewhere. And this is the most interesting fact, that this was true for both boys, if not more so for girls. We thought it was going to be, just boys would like the mean characters, but girls like the edgier characters. Some people might go off and say it's the bad boy syndrome. I don't believe that. I just go, this is what the data showed us. It also could explain why there's the Angry Birds phenomenon. They're angry for a reason. Kids like it. So when it gets down to mini games, getting out of character design, we use something that was known as observational listening to get our feedback back from the kids. And this is the art of watching how something is said. It's more important than what they say. And I've got a lot of experience with observational listening just through other careers and other things I've been doing. More commonly, it's also known as tells. And the cool thing about kids is they have absolutely no tells. They are so honest in their body language just because they don't know what their bodies are doing. They have no control over what their bodies do. I wish I could say the same thing about adults, though. So asking kids what they liked or if they were having fun, it never gave us an accurate answer. Again, they wanted to please us. And let me just share here an example of this. Actually, before I go into the example, what we wanted to see is we wanted to actually see them play. Plain and simple. I just want to see them play. We want to see if they're playing, how long they're playing, if they want to play again, and when do they want to play again. So one of our play tests showed that we had a 6-year-old girl. She was really engrossed, and we could tell just by her body language. She couldn't wait for her turn. She was waiting with anticipation. She wanted to play someone else's turn. She was really in it. She was playing this game nonstop for an hour, completely in it. Afterwards, we asked her, did you like it? And she did this. No. Which kind of perplexed us a little bit. So we dug a little bit deeper, asked a few more questions, and we found out the only reason why she didn't like the game was because it had no princesses in it. And she likes princesses, not pirates. Her body language was saying that she totally enjoyed the game, but that was the only reason why she didn't like it. But the big thing is that we just care if they played. That's the only thing we cared about. Had fun, liked it, doesn't matter. Are you playing the game? Do you want to play the game? Are you willing to play the game? And do you want to play again? That's what mattered. So we made some mini games. That's because that's part of the whole Mario Party philosophy, is have some mini games to win treasure. And we followed what was known as intelligent design. And many of you probably in the audience who've done design work knows that this is where form follows function. And so we wanted to have mechanics that were very intuitive, easy to pick up, yet were still fun and addictive. And because since our game relies on mini games, we can't have them get bored at all. So again, this is in the grand experiment of things. Instead of prototyping these mechanics, we decided to test by using someone else's game. Now our game designer, Sarah Ma, she found this great app. I highly recommend you download it. It's called the Crazy Test. It is a veritable syllabus of pretty much every mini game out there that you can find, every mechanic and every variation of the mechanic on a touch screen. So what we did is we gave these games to the kids with the only direction of explaining what the game was, but not how to play it and how to win. The only direction we gave them is to play the game for as long as you want, and then periodically we would probe them, do you want to keep playing? What we did is then recorded the time that each child played the game, and then we also took notes, oh, that's an interesting change, of when they stopped playing or if they were prompted to. And if they actually said, no, I want to stop, that actually had more impression on us than if we had to remind them, because that said a lot. As also, we watched their body language. Were they having fun? Were they stressed? Was there a smile on their face? Were they kind of looking at us saying, can I stop? And then we asked them at the end of all this process to pick 5 games they would want to play again. And we did the same thing with adults as well, too. And then we compared the data, the list of the 5 games with the data above. And all the top-ranked mechanics that we found became mini-games in our game. So I'm going to share with you what we found were the top mechanics, the most intuitive mechanics to pick up. The first one is if you tap and drag away multiple moving objects that are going towards a central target. This became our tentacle swiping game. Another one is tap on numerous random moving objects on a screen. This became our bat whacking game. Now, if you tap repeatedly on multiple predictably moving objects, that was our smacking spiders game. If you tap and drag through a randomly generated maze, that was our whaling sailing game. Also, if you tap and flick on a moving object that's moving across the screen, that became our final end game. And also we found that just making a choice, just that random lottery was fun. So we gamified just drawing a card now became pick one of 3. The other two mechanics that we found was a swiping in a random direction really quickly for in a time-limited fashion. That became one of our duels. And the other was tapping multiple time-limited objects that only show up for a little bit, kind of like whack-a-mole. And that became our cannon duel. So those are the top 8 mechanics we found that were intuitive and fun, based on from our studies from both adults and from kids. Now, going to the metagame, it's a 4-player multiplayer game, and what we wanted to do was, again, keep the kids playing. So we'd fill in the blanks with AI if there wasn't 4 players available. And this became quite contentious with the adults. Now, they would say things like, well, actually, before we get there, they were actually, we had the turns really short. So, the one problem with having AI in there is if you have a single-player game, that's your worst-case scenario. So that loop has to be really quick. The worst case is that if you're playing a single-player game, it takes them 90 seconds to get back into play. And this is where parents go, my kids will get bored and lose attention waiting for their turn. And why watch AI play? We should be able to skip the AI turns. And lastly, my kids don't want AI. Have the option to play without AI. Well, like everything else adults said, we said, thank you for sharing. And we actually tested this out, and the kids were really engrossed with the AI. In fact, so we did a couple play tests without the AI. It reduced the opportunities of their chances to play. The world was so big that they couldn't get into these mini games. As well, when the AI got on the screen, they didn't know if it was a player or if it was a computer. They just watched them and you went, oh, this is cool. No, don't do that. You can see how they're getting really into it. And then they were actually starting to rally up against the AI. It was kind of cool to see. It was us versus the computer. So again, it was the adults who kind of seemed like they were the impatient players, not the kids, which was really kind of funny. The kids had all the patience in the world, and the adults were more like, let's get going, let's get going. But we still catered to them. We sped up the AI turns a little bit, so it was only 20 seconds per turn, 60 seconds worst case. But still, don't underestimate the attention span of the kids. If they like it, they'll keep engrossed. Now, we didn't follow all the advice that the good doctor gave us. He said also negative turns are a good thing. And what we found was that after subsequent negative turns, the players actually got frustrated and they stopped playing. And remember, we wanted them to keep playing. We only cared if they play. And the reason why is because we looked at our globe. Our globe is not like a regular game board where there's a linear path going through and some clear objectives. There was not enough choice to figure out what they had to do. So what we did, though, is we actually gave them choice. We made sure that on every turn they had, they could always do something. There was never such a thing as a negative turn unless it was by choice. They could draw a card. They could use a teleporter. They could play for a treasure. They can duel someone else. Or they could do nothing. Now, throughout this whole study, we actually found that there was a distinct play pattern. And it wasn't based on gender, it wasn't based on culture. It was solely based on age. So after a while, near the end, when we knew we had play tests coming in from a certain age group, we knew how they were going to play. So the age 5-year-olds, I like to call them the explorers. They were just happy to be playing. I'm playing. And they would just move around aimlessly. Doesn't matter what they were going for. They didn't quite care. They had most fun just watching other people play. And if they landed on a mini game, they'd rather have someone else play that game for them. Now, as soon as you got to a 6-year-old, they actually understood the basic rules and the concept of going for treasure. And they actually would seek this stuff out, but at the same time, they would much rather have someone else play their mini game for them until they actually got enough confidence to go, you know what? Okay, let me try these out myself. They won't duel. They want to keep their treasures because they're afraid of retaliation. They're fear of losing their treasures. Now, as they got to the 7-year-olds, these are the more rounded characters. They'll sometimes initiate duels, but when given a choice, they'd rather take a card or a treasure than actually go duel. But they were very supportive for the younger players. They were the ones that would help them out and play for them. Now, the 8-year-olds, they're the duelers. They totally understand dueling, and they really appreciate this. And they'll actually seek out other duelers, but they won't duel people who won't duel with them. And the 9-year-olds were tactical. Anyone above 9, they understood the main rules, and they took advantage of every situation that was there. Now, I may have a little bit of time through. I'm just going to rush through these really quickly, because these are lessons from the good doctor. I know I might be going over time, because I saw the 1-minute mark. Shape early, shape often. most of you should know what shaping is. It's basically the act of getting them winning as soon as possible. We made sure that on their first turn they were playing a mini game. So they knew the rules and understood how to play and how to get the value out of the game. Another interesting fact was that over 60% of the kids younger than 8, they don't read. It doesn't mean that they can't read and they're not able to read. They just don't want to read. It's not playing. It's reading. That's school. So minimize the use of your text. I cannot stress this enough. Use no more than 2 to 4 words when giving your direction or instruction at a time. And instead, rely on things like audio cues, on-screen tutorials, and visual cues and iconography. And lastly, kids, they won't play a game that's perceived for kids or babies or anyone that's younger than themselves. Remember, they want to grow up. So when choosing your things inside your game, including the naming, avoid using words like little, young, kids, we when describing or choosing your game title. We have one final lesson, and it's not from the kids, but it's actually from the reviewers. And this was happened after we release our game. We gave it out to some professional reviewers out there, and they made the same assumptions we made throughout the whole design process. The kids won't like this. The kids will get bored. Oh, they won't. Oh, the characters are too mean. They should have more girl characters, more boy characters. Well, again, thank you for sharing. We made those same assumptions, but like I said at the very beginning of this speech, every assumption we made was wrong, and we tested it out to verify it. And that unfortunately translated into kind of mediocre reviews from some of those reviewers. The best ones that we got, though, were from the parental reviewers, because they based their reviews on watching their kids play and playing with them and seeing the play experience. They saw exactly what we saw. We had 50 Cub Scouts playing this game, and they were enthralled for 2 hours. They kept playing, and they wouldn't stop. And that was just amazing. So choose your reviewers wisely if you want to get some good results for kids' games. Just don't blanket it out to every reviewer. So that's basically it for my talk, and that's how much I could share. If you guys are more curious about how the grand experiment turned out, I'm actually in one of the articles in this month's Casual Connect. Please check it out. As well, you can scan the QR code if you want to see a link for the game, or you can download it yourself from any of the major stores. And feel free to contact me by email or LinkedIn, or on, wow, that's another editing error, or on Twitter. I'd be more than happy to share some of this stuff with you and talk to you about it. I used to work at Slant Six Games. I'm no longer there, unfortunately. But I came here on my own dime just to explain this to you because I'm so passionate about how this project worked. I would be happy to share and talk to you about this game. It was a phenomenal experience. Lastly, my agent wants me to put this in here because I am an actor. If you want to check me out on IMDb, go ahead. But outside of that, my name is Kelly FENNIG. Thank you so much for your time. And it doesn't matter how old you are. Just remember, you were kids once, so just keep playing. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Well, that was a new one.
Did you get
Please.
that were looking for how the game should?
Hey Kelly, did you get some parents that were interested in what the game should be in terms of a learning tool? Were there ever any suggestions that it should be harder in places as a?
We treat it more like a family, like this is more like the family board game. It's pure entertainment. There are some control things in there, like for just at least eye-hand coordination, but it also did teach some things, or at least for patience sharing. It wasn't perceived from an education point of view. It was just purely entertainment. And it's basically want to go back to the family board game, the family night, playing around a board game. Please.
So how many user tests total did you do and over what period of time?
Okay, the project took 16 weeks from pre-production to release. 6.5 weeks of pre-production, 7 weeks of actual implementation. Every day we had a play test. Every day, from day 1 of pre-production to the last day before we released. It was either us or kids or both. And so we at least got a good feel of how it was changing, how we needed to tweak it. Just for kids, every day.
How did you get so many kids?
Craigslist is good. Friends are good. Contacts are good. You just have to word your questions very carefully on Craigslist. Don't ask for a bunch of kids on Craigslist. You might get the wrong response.
Please.
Hey, I got here a few minutes late. I don't know if you mentioned it already, but what kind of incentive did you offer the adults to bring in their kids on Craigslist?
Just a simple gratuity. For the adults, we relied on $5 to $10 gift cards from the Starbucks that was just around the corner. For kids, basically those little Playmobil pirates for $2 a pop. I think we racked up a good couple $100 worth of Playmobil pirates just to give out to kids. That was just enough to just say thank you for your time. And that was enough. Yeah. Any other? Please.
You were testing how many kids you have at a time, and was there a number that you found was more effective or less effective to get your results?
Well, we did vary it between 1 and 4, and then we usually have 2 or 3 play tests at a given time as well, too. Actually, I would say all of them were effective because it's just we cared about how they played and how they interacted with each other or what happens if they were alone. And we also did a lot of family play tests, too. So we got to see how siblings interacted with each other, how parents would interact with their kids, who would teach who. Sometimes it was the kids teaching the parents instead of vice versa. Please.
Do you see a difference in the behavior of the kids versus the self-reported top 5 favorite game mechanics?
With the question was, can you repeat the question just one more time?
So when you walk them through that test,
Yeah.
and you track kind of all the behaviors,
Yep.
may that differ from the top 5 games that surface from that?
Yeah.
May that differ from the self-reported top 5 favorites of the kids?
That's actually, we just did some statistics with it. So that's what actually got a lot of the things that they said with the top 5, about 4 out of the 5 games that they chose there kind of, it translated well on their bodies when they were actually, like, the ones that they were kind of getting into, the ones that they played longer, those tended up being in their top 5. There were obviously about maybe 1 out of every 5 that was kind of a surprise, like, okay, your body language didn't say that, but you want to play it again. And part of those ones were the ones where there was a bit more challenge to it, where it's more like, okay, I didn't get it now, but I think I've got it now. And it was kind of watching those aha moments, and that, again, stacked up in our statistics when we were choosing our top 8. Please.
Probably pretty quick, but how long of each sessions, like when you had the kids in, were they playing for like an hour? Were they playing for half an hour? Did it vary?
Sometimes it did vary. One typical playthrough for the game is 20 minutes. That's what we want to make sure our game cycle was the game could be completed from start to finish within 20 to 30 minutes. And then sometimes they went longer by choice or by circumstance because they'd start another game when we weren't looking. And then we're like, okay, let's go again. And that actually happened with the Cub Scouts. Like, we thought we were only being there for a half hour, and they had like 3 or 4 games under their belt just going, okay, we're done. Let's start again. Did they see us? Okay, we start, and we go. So that's how we kind of knew we had something really kind of special going on there. They wanted to play again. And remember, it's one of the 3 things: if, when, and how long. So they wanted to play again. That was a good indicator.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I'm sure he's going to step in the back so people can continue to ask questions.
Yep.
While we let Carla get up and get situated.
Thank you.